My name is Derek Stewart. I was a throat cancer patient many years ago, and more recently had a pacemaker fitted. I'm a strategic advisor. I've been actively involved with patients and the public involvement in research. Patient-public involvement, PPI, with trials methodology research. What's it actually all about? These short videos will just start to explain some of that, start to uncover some of the things that make it work, some of the things that are challenging. And it's facilitated by the Health Research Board in Ireland, their Trials Methodology Research Network, alongside and in collaboration with the Medical Research Council, National Institute for Health Research, Trials Methodology Research Partnership, sort of wider body. So this road trip is very much about us going on a journey together. Patient and public involvement and engagement in research is there for a purpose. It's about the shift to doing research with people rather than just to them. It helps us focus on the relevance and the needs of both patients and the public, and those may be different. Fundamentally, it is about a dialogue, a conversation, and discussion, which is about bringing about improvements to health and social care. It is about research being more open and transparent. It is also about activity that raises public knowledge and understanding. What is trials methodology research? When we take part in a health research study, we're helping to provide evidence of what's effective and what isn't, whether the medicine works or it doesn't. Trials methodology provides us with the evidence of whether the research methods themselves are effective. This is the land of trials methodology research. It is in effect research on research, and in particular on the research methods. Trials methodology research focuses on the methods, practices and processes, the how, the what, and looks at areas such as when it's in the design of a trust study, the way a study is done through the conduct, how it's looked at and analysed, and how we report and review health research. Engaging and involving patients and the public with trials methodology research may seem to both researchers and the public, in Com to Bean's words, as having a sense of elsewhere. To Bean is talking in his case about visiting Wexford as a young child from the village of Enniscorthy. That sense of wonderment, of confusion, but also of opportunity. Why might it feel like a sense of elsewhere? When we're involved with a clinical study, we can bring our direct experience. It feels like somewhere we recognise and know. But for both the researchers and for the public, it feels as if we're drawn away from each other. The researchers, in this case, often don't have less direct contact with patients and the public. What they do is highly specific in nature, and it's difficult to see a purpose. Equally, the patients and the public, if it's less about our personal experience, more about patients and participants in the future, it's difficult to see how we can do and what we can do. It can feel like elsewhere to both the researchers and to the members of the public who get involved. Sometimes we have to think about meeting and visiting, sometimes think about the detail we get involved with. For example, if you're going on a trip to France, it doesn't require us to know all the history, all of the language, all the words. What we do benefit from is a tourist guide, a phrase book, some basic information about currency, and suggestions of where to go. Researchers don't need to know everything about what happened to us, and we don't need to know everything about methodological research. So in the detail of buying a watch, right, we don't need to do a horology course. We might benefit from, how to look after the watch, choices of a clock face, how to change the battery. It's about style, comfort, practical use. In other words, our talk and discussion should have a purpose. Finally, sometimes in methodological research, it feels slightly abstract or almost too abstract. But equally for the researchers, they might feel talking to us seems too abstract. But when it should feel natural, what we want to do is concentrate on what can we learn from each other. So why involve? Why involve patients and the public in this work? What's the gain? What's the added value? And what is the purpose? If we look at the research itself, it benefits from external perspectives, gaining people's opinions, their attitudes, and their insights. But it also makes the research more relevant to public need. If we think about it from the methodologist's point of view, they get different viewpoints in their research. They understand more about public needs. It's greater transparency, but also better comprehension. When they're explaining their work, they're probably able to do it in a better manner. And finally, what about from the patient-public point of view? We get a better understanding of what this work is about and aspects of the research about the way it's done and the analysis, which helps us in other parts of our life. Alice Begane and Maria Olson, Paula Williamson said, PPI, public patient involvement, increases the value, integrity and quality of this research. So what do we know from those different examples and from one of the priority studies as well? It's clear that people need support. There needs to be some space, some safe space. That it's about a two-way process. That ultimately it's about a relationship. But that it helps ground what we do. And that ultimately what we're doing is bringing different perspectives to the table. So it's somewhere a place that has common ground for mutual benefit, has clear expectations, is a safe space, has a reason for meeting, an uncertainty or risk benefit for discussion. A place that uses metaphors, pictures to explain and make sense, and is finally a place that welcomes and encourages us to stay in touch. A sense of elsewhere, taken from Colm Tóibín's work, is the title we've given to our roadmap, which looks at patient-public involvement with trials methodological research. And there are certain guiding principles that we've applied to this work. The first of these is about trust, respect and partnership. Second, being collaborative, using inquiry-based processes. In other words, just asking questions and learning as we go along. The third aspect of it is equality, diversity and inclusion, and why this matters so much to patient and public involvement. And equally, if we're doing patient and public involvement, we should also be doing equality, diversity, inclusion and access. We have certain questions that we're setting off to do, and I shan't go through all of them. But what we want to do is work from what do we know already? How can we make sure that equality and diversity are, there and part of what we're doing? How do we make sure we're using that inquiry-based research and those other questions that you can see? It is worth just remembering that when Colm Tóibín wrote this, it was for him visiting Wexford from the small town of Enniscorthy. And he said, for me, even still, Wexford is the most exotic place. But back then, it was pure wonder. It had a Woolworths, a bookshop, and a long street, where you were unlikely to meet anyone you knew. But mainly, it was the sense of elsewhere, or being away from home, if only for a few hours, that made the town of Wexford so great.